Hello, hello, hello. I hope you can hear me. I think the sound is good. Um, Welcome to Detox Your Home Office. I am super excited to be hanging out with you guys for the next few weeks and to totally help you through the process that I take a lot of our clients hands-on to sort and organize and create a simplified filing system that can finally free you from having piles everywhere around your home and your office and maybe your car and maybe the basement and the garage and even the bathroom. Sometimes I see paperwork in people's homes. So I am Chris Scrott-Weedleton, and I founded Organizing Maniacs in 2007. And over the last 10, 11 years, I've been really trying to perfect my paper filing system. So I'm excited that you're here and that you're taking the time and the opportunity to just really learn what is the importance of doing paperwork and what is the value that, that stuff has in your life. I think the majority of the time, people keep way more stuff than they should just because simply they just don't know what to do with it. So I'm hoping to really help you through understanding of why are you keeping the stuff, how does it matter, what is the long-term value of it to you, and in that process really develop good paper habits. I find that, having good paperwork is just like anything else that we do, right? It's like eating right, and it's like going to the gym. It is something that it takes time to learn. And as we progress in our healthiness of having paper, we learn how to just really to deal with it. And over the years, I've just been really surprised at how little we are taught about what to do with our paperwork. So I'm really excited that you're here and that we're going to learn. So, so the agenda for today is a little bit more like just kind of get to know the process. We're going to talk a little bit about like expectations. I'm going to run you through the record retention guideline that you got attached to the email. I'm gonna talk about a little bit about how to succeed, brain-based challenges. I'm going to talk about goal setting. I believe that people are much more likely to continue doing something that's really painful when we understand why we're doing it. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that today, just because I feel like if you set yourself up in the beginning and you really understand what's motivating you to, to go through this process, by the end of week 2, when you're like, this is for the birds, I really don't want to sort through any of my paperwork, this is not going to work for me, all of the negative self-talk that we tend to do when we kind of give up on the things that we have committed to. I want you to have something to remind yourself of why you're doing this. And hopefully at some point, you just really embrace your goal, and then it'll help you through the finish line. I just recently, so I taught this class about 4 months ago, and then just recently I received an email from somebody that had been my student during that class, and he said, I have to be completely honest, when I took the class 4 months ago, I was just not in the right frame of mind, and even though I went through every single lesson and I came to class and I learned a lot, I just wasn't ready to take any action. However, now I'm feeling really motivated by it, and so I'm taking what I have learned and now I'm starting to implement it. So sometimes it is a delayed process, right? And I feel like sometimes I do that too. I learn how to do something and then I'm like, I'm going to do that one day, and then one day turns into 4 months later, and then I'm finally motivated to get that thing done. So I'm hoping that you're going to be motivated right now. However, I'm hoping that you will learn some skills that will help you through. And depending on how much paperwork you're sorting, it is a process and it may take a while. But I can't say this enough. Whenever I help people start a new filing system, I always remind them, don't worry about the backlog. Just start from today. Just create a system that you can start implementing tomorrow. And then as you are moving forward, you can continue maintaining it. And as you have free time, you can go back into the past and then start sorting through the piles and all the stuff that you have laying around. because there's a lot of that stuff that's probably laying around that may have already aged themselves. So if you start, if you start picking piles and you get really bogged down and you really feel like overwhelmed, you may not create the filing system at all. So I try to be more for like current action and motivation than to like really try to be in the past and bogged down and perfectionistic and then get nothing accomplished. So I like to start off with a quote, and my friend Yasmin makes these beautiful cards from the Oregon coast, and he's very motivating, so I like to just randomly pick one. So this is a beautiful card, and the back says, "The secret to living is giving." Perfect. So I'm hoping to give you a lot of really fun, great information today that then will help you keep your paperwork organized. So awesome. So I'm going to share my screen and share a couple of things with you before we get started. So let me click some buttons over here. Sharing my screen. Okay. So this is the record retention guideline that you should have received via email. Oh, before I go here, I want to just take a moment to say that a lot of these things, I send it to you via email, but we're going to house them in the Student Center, which lives at the School of Productivity. And I sent you another email with a link to that. In the past, we used to share things differently, and things got really complicated and all over the place and disorganized. And we all know how we don't like to do that. So all of these things will be available at the Student Center. It'll be very organized there. Everything is downloadable and clickable. So you can either download it and keep it on your own computer, or you can keep it there. I haven't quite decided how long people are going to have access to the student portal. I thought about a year, but I haven't banned anybody from being there. If I ever change my mind about how long you have access to it, that is right now it's at least a year, but if I will give you plenty of notice so you can go in there and take whatever you need if you still need anything from it. So as far as organization is concerned, that's where all the files are going to live. So probably we're trying to get it all set up this week, and I apologize because I kind of got motivated to do the class, and I didn't have enough time for all of the prep tech work that needed to happen. So we're a little delayed in getting that accomplished, but you should have access to the Student Center in the next day or so, and all of the files will be there in an organized way. So, so back to the record retention guideline. This is just a little bit of a kind of a cheat sheet for all of the stuff that I'm going to teach you over the next 3 to 4 weeks. And it's organized by category, and then it's organized by how long you should keep it. So I'm going to go over every single thing in here in detail over the length of this class. But it is an easy, easy cheat sheet. So if you're like, oh, how long do I keep this? You can go find it over there. We're always perfecting this. So if you find some information that is like, doesn't seem relevant or out of date or is wrong, please give us some feedback and let us know. Sorry, I thought my light was buzzing. I like to always remind people that, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an attorney. I am just an organizer that kind of felt the need to put some of this stuff together in a way that just felt really cohesive. So you should really understand your own situation before you start throwing your paperwork away. And you should establish your own guidelines to how to retain your paperwork before you just, start purging all of the things that I may suggest that you no longer want or need. So if you have very unique situations that are just specific for you, you're welcome to, send me questions and we can chat about that a little bit. So this is the record retention guideline. It'll kind of be like the, the home base for this class. So that's that. And then I gave you the PowerPoint presentation. So I will let you, pull that up if you want to just Just move a couple of things up and down here. Okay. Oh, that's not going to work. Okay. I'm just going to have to do this manually. So, so normally when I work with people, everybody wants a magic wand. Everybody wants me to make their paperwork disappear. Well, unfortunately, there is no magic wand, right? If there was one, I probably could make a lot of money and you could be really, really happy out there. So there is no fast, quick, no maintenance way to get rid of the paperwork. There is, tricks and there's understanding why you're keeping it. And that's what we're going to teach you. But all of that paperwork is going to have to sort through it. And you can do it. I know you can do it. You're here. You definitely want this. I want this for you. And I've literally have helped minimum like 400 people get their office organized. So I believe the system that I have created can totally free you from paper clutter. An average office for us takes between, 4 and 8 appointments. And that is a substantial amount of time, especially for you out there that thought like, maybe I'll get my office organized in 4 hours. However, once again, I want to remind you that we're going to work from today into the future. And as you have time, you can go back to the past. So don't get bogged down by the amount of time, but you should save some time in your calendar to make progress when you're, in between classes or after the class is over, to just go back and really sort through that paperwork and make decisions. So it's going to take time. Set some time in your calendar and you'll be really happy. I'm going to give you a lot of strategies and I try not to be overwhelming, but sometimes that's not who I am. I give people a lot of ideas. So I'm also going to give you a lot of my expertise. I believe you have the ability to change. Sometimes I feel like you have to take all of the strategies I give you and then you have to refine them to fit your best learning style, right? Sometimes people are like, hey, I can implement all of these things and I can make them work for me. And sometimes I feel like if people just took 2 ideas, that may significantly improve their paperwork process. And then you can go back and maybe get 2 more ideas and then implement those. So find a pace that is good for you. Try not to feel like you're drinking from the fire hose and then you may not get anything accomplished. So at the end of each class, I'm going to ask you to commit to a couple of things that you want to do to get accomplished, that you feel comfortable that you can get it done within a week. And then how are you going to make progress that way, right? So the way to succeed in this class, and I think the way to succeed in anything in life, is just like a commitment to the process, right? Whenever we're learning something new, the body's always going to resist it because we always want to go back to like how it used to be, but how it used to be really doesn't work for us, which is the reason why we're trying to make change to begin with. So a lot of the things I'm going to teach you are really different than what you have ever learned before. We're going to talk about a lot of commingling. We're going to talk about a lot of elimination. We're going to talk about, doing things in a way that you have never thought about your paperwork that way before. And whenever you feel your body resisting it, I want you to be like, okay, I am one with like change. And even though I don't like it, I'm going to give this a try. One time I worked with a client and I helped her create the filing system. We spent, 4 appointments doing it. And then she was like, okay, I got it. I went away and I don't know, maybe like a few months later, she called me and she's like, well, this doesn't work at all. And I said, okay. So she was like, I want you to come over and give me a different filing system. So I went over there and I noticed that nothing had changed. Like she hadn't added any paper to it. She hadn't taken anything out. And I said, well, have you really given it a try? And she was like, no. She's like, it's too different. I just can't do it. And so I said, I'll be glad to redo your system, but I think you'd just be wasting your money. So why don't you really truly give it a try for at least 30 days? And so she was like, oh, this is awful. I just can't do this. It's really different. And so she finally committed to giving it a try. So 30 days, I did go back there, and I told her, I was like, if this doesn't work, I will come back and just redo your filing system free of charge. And I went back there 30 days, willing to just work for free. And she said, oh my God, this system changed my life. And I was like, okay, what happened? She was like, I finally just started putting stuff in there. And then it just really kind of grown on me how easy it was to maintain and how easy it was to put stuff away. So whenever you're resisting, try to just go with it, right? And maybe, you know, it's like they say, if you just get yourself to the gym, you're more likely to work out than if you're like sitting on the couch thinking, I really don't like the gym, and I really don't like working out, and I really don't want to be here, and this is really, you know, annoying and upsetting and tiring, and my pants don't fit right, blah, 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 whatever excuse you're making. So the trick is not to make excuse and just embrace it and go with it. So we're gonna talk briefly about like time blocking. You know, once again, I just alluded to that. In order to succeed at this, you're gonna have to set up some time to like create your files, to sort through your paperwork, to, you know, filing the stuff in there and like making a little bit of progress that way. We're gonna talk a little bit about, you know, I think goal setting is always really important because if you don't know the reason why you're doing something, you're most likely to just give up. And having defined goals has scientifically been proven to help people actually accomplish them than if you're just like, well, I kind of want a new filing system. I kind of want to get rid of my paperwork. I kind of bought this because it was, I don't know, wasn't that much money, or it didn't seem like it would take a lot of time. Or, you know, if you're not committed to the goal of actually getting rid of the paper, you may not really make any progress at all. So, and we're going to work through a little bit of visualization, which I have found over the years that it really helps my clients stay focused and stay with the goal of getting their paperwork managed. You know, whenever we think about goal setting, we always think of it as like a straight path, right? But goal setting is definitely not that way at all. It's filled with webs and curves and all kinds of distractions. And once again, I speak for myself. Sometimes I try to do things and I'm like, you know, I think it's gonna take me an hour, and before I know it, it's like 3 days later and I'm got, you know, all kinds of distracted by all kinds of things. So it happens. That's part of life. You know, there's never a time when I feel like life doesn't get in the way of everything we're trying to accomplish. It's just the universe way of saying, well, I'm going to throw a wrench at you and hopefully you can handle it. And it's going to be the same thing with this process, right? I think to expect that it's going to go perfectly and that everything's going to work out is just not going to happen that way. So I like setting goals that are smart. And, you know, if you have read any book on goal setting, is not my saying. You know, they have to be specific, they have to be measurable, they have to be attainable. I like to set up realistic goals, and there should always be a time frame attached to it. Just helps because, you know, with deadlines, we're much more likely to accomplish things, and left to our own device, things just expire. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said I'd committed to going to yoga with her. It was 4 years ago that I committed to going to yoga with her. She's like, are you going to yoga? And I was like, no, I'm not going to yoga. I didn't put a deadline on it, so it was like it never happened. And honestly, I probably would really enjoy yoga, but you know, I probably should say like, I'm going to go to yoga starting in June, or, you know, have a defined date on when that's going to happen. So, so if you don't have the time to work through this right now, or if you're going to, you know, if you're going to spread out the work or whatever, I like for you to establish a defined goal about when do you want to get this project accomplished that is realistic for you. So, let's see. I think when you set up goals, we should always remember to to celebrate the small breakthroughs and wins that we accomplish, right? Sometimes I work with a lot of small business owners that are high achievers, and as we set up goals and we get to them, we just tend to just move the bar a little bit farther, and then we move the bar a little bit farther, and then we keep moving the bar, and then we're just never taking the time to celebrate the fact that we have gotten that far, right? So I want you to create defined goals for you, and then I want you to celebrate those small accomplishments. So if your first goal is to actually create the filing system, whether you put any paperwork in there or not, I want you to celebrate the fact that, yes, in fact, you have put paperwork, you have in fact created your filing system. It doesn't matter there is no paperwork in there. The filing system is ready to go, right? Yay, let's just celebrate that, and let's just be feeling good that we have accomplished something. I believe that when we take the time to celebrate our small wins and our accomplishments, we also get more motivated to actually do more, right? Because now all of a sudden I'm reminded that I don't have to feel bad because I committed to doing something that I didn't get accomplished, which is what we do all the time. We're always feeling guilty about the things that we said we would do that we didn't do. But when we actually accomplish them, we forget to celebrate. So I want you to create little rewards for yourself as you create these little milestones about your paperwork and how you're going to celebrate the fact that you have accomplished them. So I'm going to share, I think I should share the screen with you for a minute. Oh, sorry. I always forget to click on the share button. So this is my old office. I moved office not that long ago because I used to have an office in the front of the house, and that's where everybody used to come up and have conversations. That's where the printer was. See the printer over there? And it got really disruptive, so I moved elsewhere, and I haven't updated this picture. However, but the very first time when I started organizing Maniacs, my very first desk was one of those plastic fold-out tables with the, that you take to, that you fold it in half and you take it to like picnics and vendor fairs, and they use them in school functions. It was like one of those, and it was really ugly, and it was not inspiring at all. And I found myself cluttered with a lot of paper. I had no systems. And one day I bought those 2 pictures at a yard sale, and they became my inspiration. And whenever, I did not hang them on the wall, but I just had them on the floor. And as I started, becoming more serious about my business and the way I wanted my office to look, those pictures became my inspiration. So every time I came into my office, I would look at them and I'd be like, oh, this is what I want my office to look like. And then I would spend some time tidying up and creating systems around my paperwork. So over, it took almost me a year to just kind of like declutter, create good systems for my paperwork, and paint and get this amazing stand-up desk, which is the desk I currently have. I have had that desk for I want to say around 4 years, and I hardly ever sit. My chair is basically my footstool, but I love the desk. And when I finally got that office really organized and my paperwork had a place, and so I probably had been organizing about 3 years at that point, and I was able to create a filing system for myself, and my office looked good. I felt really good about myself when I went in there, and the better I felt, the more productive I became, right? So I don't want you to really underestimate the value of having some really good goals, and what is that going to do for you, and why do you want your paperwork to be organized? And I said it took me 2 years to where I wanted, in between like getting the desk, painting it, and like getting all of this stuff accomplished. And the fact that I probably looked at the pictures for a year before I actually got to that point. It was a very lengthy process. So that is my inspiration, and I absolutely still love those pictures. They sit in a different part of the house now than they used to. I probably should continue sharing these because it has a little bit of like visualization ideas for you guys. So, you know, I want you to think about like what kind of paint would you have, what kind of furniture would you have, what kind of accessories would you have? Like, if you already have an office that you absolutely love and adore, like what is, you know, what could make that place better? Like, you know, sometimes I work with people and they have really good bones in their office, but because there's so much clutter everywhere, you can't even see their furniture. So if you already love the place that you have, then just remind yourself of what it used to look like before it got all cluttered. So, you know, maybe make a little like a mini vision board, or if you just, you know, if you don't have time to create a vision board, maybe just write some of your ideas in a journal, or just literally pick a white piece of paper and just write down what are some of your wishes for that, you know, kind of your paper clutter has been keeping you from having, and then post it up somewhere where you can visually see it on a regular basis. Like I was recently working with a client, she posted it on the door on a yellow, you know, like a yellow Post-it note that was like this big that she just recently bought. So as she walked by, it was bright, it was visible, and she could really see like, this is my goal, this is the reason why I'm doing this. These are the things that are going to be better for me if I didn't have paper clutter everywhere. So, so just really, you know, seems like all of the offices that I picked were white, and maybe that's like the mode I'm in lately. I'm thinking about just making my office really kind of like white and airy and fun. And I don't have kids, so there's no reason why it couldn't stay clean that way. But what motivates you, I think it's really important to consider. So I also work with clients that have a very defined, disorganized mindset, and that seems to be like permanent. Sometimes I work with people and they feel like, oh, I'm never going to get organized. Oh, I have tried everything. And then once again, as we start learning something new, resistance come into our bodies, and then we're just saying, well, I'm just defaulting back to old patterns where I'm like, oh, I already tried that before, and that didn't work for me, so I'm not going to try it again. So sometimes I tell people, just like for the time being, when you're trying to learn this, maybe you can forget all of the things that you have tried in the past that didn't work for you, and maybe you can just give this a fresh start and try not to have this just disorganized mindset that, you know, this is not going to work for you, but perhaps this is the time when all of the stars are going to align in the perfect way, and you can have a really good filing system. I like to tell my clients that, you know, they're OPIP, and that means, you know, they're an organized person in progress, which means that it doesn't matter what's happened in the past. There's always a moving forward process that you're going to get better at. And I have had clients that have been with me from the very beginning. And sometimes I see those clients and I remember when they were extremely disorganized and that everything was everywhere and that they had no level of organization in their lives. And today they live a completely different life that is so much better because they showed up, they did their thing, and they have the belief that something better could happen for them. So I have one particular client that honestly, I thought this is going to be a real challenge, and she has totally transformed her organizing skills and her systems, and it's amazing what organization has done to her. So it can be done. I've seen it. So, you know, try to move away from the destructive self-talk that you may do to yourself, especially when you get frustrated. I see that a lot when people are like in the midst of like, you know, big piles of paper and they've been sorting for hours and they're just like, I'm just so disorganized and I'm so messy and nothing ever works and blah, blah, blah. Just try to really refrain from saying those things to yourself. Just because they are not going to help you get anywhere. They're just going to help you feel better. I mean, they're going to help you feel worse, and then you're going to feel more stuck. So just try to, you know, Positive affirmation. There are a lot of studies nowadays. I'm like reading so much about mindfulness, and I've been meditating on and off for the last year regularly. And there is so much research on positive affirmation that if you start saying those things to yourself, at some point they help you change your mindset. And there's a lot of brain-based challenges with the clients that I work with, but I think it all starts with the belief that there is a better way, and then figuring out what way is it going to get you there. So start saying things like, I'm working on getting more organized. So that may be like a bridge in between, like, I am so disorganized and I'm never going to be organized. Just saying, I'm working on getting more organized. I'm going to succeed this time because I have a plan, or, I am making an effort into getting organized. Whatever you feel comfortable saying that gets you to that place, I recommend trying that. So, and always acknowledge that you're taking the steps to get there, right? Because it's, once again, it's positive habit formation. And when we are positive about our mindset and we speak to ourselves in a positive way, our bodies feel that, and then we're more likely to engage in the process in a way that feels positive, and we're more likely to create change, and we're more likely to get results. So permanent change takes time. I don't have to beat the dead horse here. I like exercise analogies because I hate to exercise. But, nobody goes into the gym and say like, hey, I want to lose 100 pounds and expect that to happen next day, right? If you want to lose 100 pounds, that's going to take a lot of work. This morning, I met a woman that lost 80 pounds. And I said, how did you do that? And she said, well, I gave up sugar. I gave up carbs. And I said, what do you eat? And she was like, I'm in the keto diet. I eat a lot of meat and oils and fat, and she totally refused to eat breakfast that I had brought, which consisted of, donuts and bagels. And that took a lot of self-discipline. So permanent change takes time. And I mean, she'd been doing this for a year and a half. So she was very well disciplined in her, in her diet and what she ate and what she didn't eat. But I'm sure when she was very first started, she fell off the wagon a couple of times. So also, sometimes doing paperwork, it's, remember how I said, we're going to start from today moving forward. So don't, as you're looking at your paperwork clutter from the back, if you don't have time for that, but you're at least committing to moving forward, you're making a little bit of progress every day. And sometimes I tell people, like, do a little bit forward and then a little bit back, and then before you know it, you'll be there. So I love Post-it notes, and I know this is really silly, and sometimes I work with people and I'm like, wow, doesn't everybody use Post-it note the way I do use Post-it notes? So I decided to add this to the class just because I feel like sometimes the things I think that are common sense may not be common sense, and people think like, oh, that was brilliant. And I was like, wow, I thought everybody knew that. So I stopped making assumptions. So sometimes I'm sure you're going to be like, that Chris girl, that was so silly. I totally knew that. But maybe it wasn't something that maybe I say other things that you're like, wow, that's brilliant. And I just can't believe I just learned that. So take that with a grain of salt sometimes. But Post-it notes are just really helpful when you're sorting through paperwork. And sometimes I am of like two point of views. One is you create the filing system and then you start sorting. And there are certain people that just feel adamant about that. And some people feel like I sort and then I create the filing system based on what I sorted. I can go either way. Sometimes I work with people and I can go both ways. We're gonna go a little bit of both when we're doing this class, just because I feel like sometimes it just gives you something to do in the meantime. But if you feel like I need to do one or the other, no problem. You can go either way. So when you're sorting paperwork, let's assume that you would start sorting without having a filing system. As you leave class tonight, you're like totally motivated. I want to get some stuff done, and you can start doing that. I would create these Post-it notes and help you sort your piles and just keep everything organized. And that's how I use them. It's like super easy. You just take the glue part goes on the bottom, and you can use them as tabs, and then you write what they are on the top. I try to write big letters. I try to write legibly because sometimes I'm like, what did I write? What does that mean? And you don't want to be doing that when you're trying to like quickly sort through paperwork. If you ever write something and you're like, what does that say? I don't remember what that says. It's probably the wrong labeling. Scratch that thing off, peel it off, and try something else. You never want to create a filing system or label anything that doesn't make any sense to you. Like, you're the person that needs to be able to file the paper. So if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to make any sense to anybody. Sometimes also I think getting started prevents people from having paralysis analysis, what I call, where it's like they have to have the perfect files and the perfect filing cabinet and the perfect tabs and the perfect colored folder. And, if they don't have all of that, they can't get started. And this kind of forces people to just get through the process and go get stuff done. So, this kind of does the thing for a label maker. For a long time, honestly, I didn't even have fancy labels. That's how I used all of my labels in all of my filing systems, and they were just as good. And whenever they got ready, I just peeled it off and made another one, and life went on just as well. So I write big letters and I stick it. That's a better picture for you. Now, whenever I start sorting paperwork, there's always, like, I start with broad categories. And sometimes people say, well, like, I like to start with like minute categories. And I'm totally cool with you doing it either way, right? Sometimes I worked with a client not that long ago that had, she traveled extensively in Europe and South America and in the US. And then she had a file for every single country with every single state, and that thing just got like massively filled with tabs. And so as she wrote every single, sticky, and she labeled those things, eventually this file wasn't very thick, like it was maybe like this much paperwork. And then I said, can we break it down by continent? Or, are there other ways we can commingle this and then reduce the amount of paperwork? And then she was like, yeah, all of the US states could go together, and instead of saying each state, it could just say US. So it helped sort by category by saying this is your travel section, and then it helped commingle in a way that was like, okay, we can put all of the United States together, or we can put all of the South America countries together, or all of the European countries can go together. So before I know it, instead of having, 75 tabs, we went to having 3 tabs. So whenever she's trying to file something now, she can easily put it into those 3 files. And guess what? Whenever you have less filing to do into, bigger files, you're much more likely to put those pieces of paper away than if she had to file each one of those pieces of paper as she was printing things into her filing system. It didn't happen. And I speak from experience because I've seen her filing system before, which was really complicated and very detailed, to what it is now, which is very simple and easy to accomplish, which is basically what we're doing here. So it's basically what I just said. This is another example. You can start off with a cooking category if you like to do that. And then you can have like crock pots, or you can have soups, or you can have entrees, or you can have desserts, and you can separate them as much as you want in the sorting process. But then when you decide, okay, I'm going to create a filing system, do I really need all of these things to be separate and have their own individual tabs? Or can I just really group things together? And then when I want to look for a recipe, I can just pull out my cooking file or my recipe file, whatever you're calling it, and can I just flip through the pages and then find the soup recipe that I really wanted, that I really should be making? Or do I really need things to be minutely separated? And the correct answer for me is like, the more detail I have, the more likely I am to not put anything in there. So I tend to just go as broad as possible. And when I want something, I'm okay with flipping through, I say for me, the max is probably between 20 and 30 pieces of paper. If I have 30 pieces of paper in there, I probably start thinking like, should I break that category a little bit so I have less paperwork inside? But at 30 pieces of paper, I'm it will take me 30 seconds to sort through those pieces of paper, and then I can easily find the recipe that I wanted, and then I can just move on with my life by making the soup, and then I can easily put it away. So it made my life super simple. So one thing I also talk to people about that I feel like tends to become a problem when people get overwhelmed, especially, and after, you get like you develop paperwork fatigue. There is a lot of recklessness happening, and you really want to be ruthless in the process, and you don't want to be reckless. And the difference is that when you're being reckless, you're just really unconcerned. You don't have any consequences for your actions. You start doing things without caution. You're like really careless. And you just start throwing things away that you maybe shouldn't be throwing away. I've worked with people where they would be like, oh yeah, that pile over there, it's all trash, it's all junk, you can just throw it all away. We don't need to spend any time doing anything with it. And then I always say like, well, why don't I just take a second to look through it? And then I find things like, people's passports or their birth certificates. One time I found a letter that a parent had written to my client, and it was literally the last note she had received from her parent. So had I just thrown the pile away the way she had asked me to do, that letter would have been gone forever, and she would have never been able to get it back. So when you're thinking like, well, I know what's in this pile, and I know there's nothing important in there, I say, well, maybe you should take one last peek through and make sure, because once you get rid of the stuff, you cannot get it back. So want to be very careful about that. So you want to be always ruthless, right? You want to be without pity. You want to be cruel, merciless, adamant, relentless. You want to be like, I don't really want this piece of paper anymore in my life. It has no really good value to me or my family. I don't know why I'm keeping it. I'm no longer going to be afraid of like throwing things away that have no long-term value to me. I'm going to just really make good decisions, and then I'm going to get rid of it. And I think as you really start learning how to deal with your paperwork and what is the value of it long-term to you, ruthlessness comes a lot easier. I am pretty ruthless all the time because I'm like looking at these things and I'm like, why do I need this? I'm very tactile, so I tend to print a lot. I don't read anything online. I gave up my iPad reading for a long time ago. It was cool for about 3 minutes, and then I was like, this is for the birds. I like to touch things, so I tend to print a lot of stuff. But I also tend to be like, I printed it, I read it, I did whatever I was supposed to do with it, and now I can let it go because it's no longer valuable to me. So you'll learn to become ruthless with time, and with, it's an acquired taste to paperwork, and as you start learning what to do with it, it'll become a lot easier for you too. So the success of your paper management is going to depend on your ruthlessness. Just because sometimes I work with people, and in the beginning, it's really easy to make decisions, right? You're like on a high of like, I'm getting organized, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna get it done, I'm so excited, this is all new and novelty. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, gee, look how much paperwork I have to go through. And I don't want to make a decision about this piece of paper, so I'll just put it here for now. I don't want to make about this paperwork. I don't want to make a decision about this paperwork. I'll just put it here for now. And then I'll put it here for now pile starts getting really, really big, right? And that's where the danger of becoming reckless becomes really, really real, right? Because if you stop making decisions, you're going to get frustrated, and before you know it, you're just going to start purging things. So if you find yourself in a place where you're like, I have put a whole bunch of pieces of paper and like I cannot make a decision right now because I'm fatigued, I want you to stop the process altogether, and I want you to just walk away from it. I want you to go do something else, or I want you to give up the project at that point, and I want you to come back at a different time, because there's no use for you just moving the paper from one pile to another because you can't make a decision, right? You're going to have to really understand what you have and what you're doing with it. So I want you to really work at trying to find balance between keeping everything, which is our default system, because if we don't make a decision, we are not going to throw anything away by accident, and keeping everything, which comes with making no decisions at all. And then our places are totally cluttered, right? So finding a happy medium between throwing everything away and keeping everything is where happiness of paperwork finally finds us. So naming convention tends to be a really important part of this process as you are learning to create a new filing system. And I already talked about this earlier. If you name something and you're like, what did I say? What does that mean? Rip that thing right up and just like rename that file immediately, right? Don't even think about like trying to keep it the same naming, because you're never going to remember what it is. I see people do that all the time. That is like one of the biggest mistakes I see people do when they're creating filing systems, is they are naming some random thing that doesn't make any sense to them. And of course, as soon as they put it down, they will forget it and they'll never see it again, and they'll never find the pieces of paper that are in there. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that because I think that's really important. Naming convention is just fancy for like, you know, what are you calling your files? So I want you to start thinking about your naming convention seriously for the first time, if you have never done that before, or differently than you have before if you're like finding yourself not filing anything away. What do you call something is probably the most important part of the process, because once again, if you just kamikaze label it, you're never going to find anything. So as part of your homework, so one homework is to think about your goals. Why are you getting organized? So the second homework is to just visualize your office a little bit. And the third one is going to be like, what are some of the things that you use regularly in your filing system that you probably need to have to file for? And once again, maybe just post it somewhere in your office, so as you walk by and you're like, okay, I have Chris, and I have, you know, let's say I had a daughter named Betty, and I had a son named Mike, and I had a husband named, you know, Bob, and I had a dog named April, and all of these people may need like a medical file, and I have a house on Main Street, and I have a Ford car. So then start like writing these things down so you can kind of start developing a document tree and what that looks like. So as you're sorting through the paperwork, right, as you're using the sticks, the sticky notes, there, how do they correlate with your document tree is going to be really helpful to you. So naming convention is really important because it allows us to understand where our filing system goes. What did I say here? Allows useful information to be assumed from the name based on the regularities. So I just realized the other day that, you know, I have lived in DC for a long time, but I realized that, that the streets have a direction. So the numbers go one way and the names go the other way. And I never realized that before. So when you understand basic naming conventions for your filing system, maybe you'll have kind of the same rules, right? All of the people are going to go together, or all of the stuff is going to go together. Which is basically how I create filing systems. I'm probably saying this, but you probably didn't. They were like, what is she saying? I was going to back up for 2 minutes. So the filing systems that I normally create for people are grouped, right? So we group all of the people together, then we group all of their stuff together that they own, like their homes and their cars and, you know, their boats and motorcycles and things like that, non-tangibles. And then we group we group our taxes together, and then we group our, we group our temporary paperwork together. So things are kind of developed in little groups. So when we're trying to think about like, where is this stuff going to go? We kind of know. And because we have better naming conventions, it becomes a lot easier to see through it. So naming conventions, once again, it allows you to simplify the way you're identifying your filing system, and it makes it easier for you to remember where is the stuff going to go. So try to be very specific on how you're going to write this stuff too. So sometimes, like, do you abbreviate things and is that easier to remember, or do you have to write the whole thing out? Sometimes I'm working with people and they are abbreviating things and they don't even know what that means. So be very diligent. I know that, like, sometimes creating labels there's only so much information you can put in there because, you know, there's only so much room, especially if you're using like a 3-inch tab. But sometimes you can, you know, you can write it on the bottom of it, or you can create a bigger label for it. I mean, like, whatever it's necessary for you to be able to remember what's in that filing system. The naming convention really comes handy. Judith Kohlberg, who has written a lot of books on chronic disorganization, literally tells people, like, if you're thinking of this piece of paper as something that would help me get out of jail, she would say, write that on the folder, you know, something that would help me get out of jail. So that way, when you're thinking it that way, you're connecting that to your filing system and it all makes sense. Abbreviation sometimes is really bad. Once again, for the simple reason, because it's like, what did I write? Does that make sense? What is the point of it? I can't remember what that means. What is that word? You don't want to be saying any of those things when you're filing. You want it to be very clear. You want your brain to look at it and easily identify what is the, you know, what is that thing saying? I connect it to the piece of paper and then I can easily put it in there and then I can move on with my life. So I normally and regularly see people do this in their filing system. You know, their cars, everybody calls their car something different. So I've seen people call it car, some people call it vehicle, some people call it automobile, some people it's transportation. You know, I worked with a client one time, he called his car a camper because he went camping so much. I have a client that calls her car Trixie. So if she named it Ford, she would be like, Ford doesn't make any sense for me. I would be looking for a Trixie. So she would never find her filing system. I recently worked with a client that had 5 different files for the exact same thing, which was her car. And they were all named different things. You know, she had a Jetta, she had one that said car, she had one that said vehicle, she had one that said DMV. So be diligent on how your brain think about this stuff and then figure out. And basically what we ended up doing is the filing system that she ended up with was labeled DMV, because when she thought about her car, she didn't think of it as a car. She thought it as the DMV. So it made absolutely no sense to label it anything else, because that was the only thing that she would really remember to put the stuff in. So it didn't matter that it didn't make sense to me. All that mattered that it made sense to her. And so we went with that. So filing never has to do with what you put in it, right? Sometimes we get so obsessed about how we put things away, or how we label things, which I think is important. However, the filing is only valuable when we're trying to find something and pull it out. And so commingling is really helpful with that. And the naming is really important with that, right? Because I want to be able to, if I wanted to find my soup recipe, I need to be able to do that in 3 seconds or less. Otherwise, I'm going to get frustrated and angry, and then I'm never going to find it. So how is it that's going to help me? And if I had the majority of my recipes were soups, I may not label it recipe. I may just label it soup, because I know it's all things that I would be eating. And then I can easily go in there because the majority of that stuff is soup, and I can just find the recipe for the thing that I want. So think about that when you're creating naming conventions for your filing system. Is what is the majority of the things that are going to go in this commingled file, right? Remember the travel, where my client had, you know, all of these subdivisions that we then broke it down into continents. And then she could easily remember that. But what is it that for you, how are you going to remember what the majority of the paperwork is in there? which is the reason why I think that sometimes using the sticky notes as you're going through that process is it's really helpful, because it's an exercise on naming things, right? You start off with like weird categories that you thought they used to be, and then you start grouping things together based on association or, you know, look-alike, and then you kind of refined how you're naming that stuff to begin with, or permanently, right? So it's like, it's an exercise of thinking about the words that go with that file, and how do you end up with, you know, with a good naming for it. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Sometimes it's pretty fast, and sometimes it's not. So I always ask people, it's like probably one of the really annoying questions I spend a lot of time asking people when I'm working with them. And the question is, how will you use it? Right? What is the long-term value of this piece of paper to you? Do you, you know, is it something that you would use in your business, or is it something personal? Does it go with your with the IRS, or is it, you know, does it go with your home, or does it go with your kids, or how is this piece of paper intertwined in your life, and how is it going to benefit you to have it? And as you answer that question, it also makes it easy for you to understand whether you need it or not, right? Because it's like, well, how will I use it? And you're like, well, this was just an FYI piece of paper that somebody gave it to me. I don't really need it anymore. And then it's like, well, then it certainly should go into your temporary filing system and not your permanent filing system. If it is something that belongs to your kid, as far as, you know, like his education or his report cards or his IEPs, or, you know, whatever that is long-term, you can easily identify that by saying, this is why I need this piece of paper. And it goes with, you know, I forgot my kid's name, but like it goes with Betty, right? And Betty will have this education filing system, and then it needs to go in there. So sometimes it's a process that you have to go through, and if you really take the time to understand what that piece of paper is and how you're going to use it, that is like the foundation for really making good decisions for your paperwork into the future. So don't skip this part. Like, ask the question aloud. And sometimes I ask my clients to do that. It's like good exercise, especially for my ADD clients that sometimes forget what they're doing, and they get distracted, and they forget what, you know, what the paperwork is, or they have it in their hand, but they, you know, forgot that it's in their hand. Is like, what do I have? What is it good for? And how am I going to use it? And then it can easily help you guide yourself into your filing system, and you can make decisions about it that way. And I tell people this all the time: if you can't think a good use for a piece of paper into the future, there's probably a really good reason that you really don't need to have it, right? Sometimes I feel like we make a big deal out of what we have and what we keep and how we're going to use it. And sometimes we obsess about things like, oh, do I really need this? I don't know. I maybe it's like somebody sent this to me, and I might need it one day. And it's like, we're all struggling about it. And the majority of the time, it's like, if you can't answer it right away, how is this valuable to me, and how will I use it? Good chance might be something that you can get rid of. So the filing system, the structure of the filing system that we are going to create together is basically a 3-part series. And in the first part, which is step 1, is a monthly filing system. So it goes from January through December. And if you look in the record retention guideline, you're going to see, you know, as you go through the first part of it, it tells you all of the things that, like, by category, and next to it, it may say monthly. That's what the monthly is. So it goes from January through December. And these are pieces of paper that I want you to think about, things that have no long-term value to you. These are pieces of paper that are like FYI. You know, somebody sends you a bill because you owe them money, and then you take that piece of paper and you're like, great, I owe the gas bill $80 for this month. You somehow send them $80, whether through, you know, your regular checkbook, or you send it online, or you pay over the phone, whatever it is that you're doing. And then you're like, thank you so much, Washington Gas, for sending me this bill. You told me I owed you $80. I gave you $80. And now this piece of paper is completely useless to me. maybe next month I might need it. I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to get rid of it yet because I may have a question. I may want to track to see what my gas usage was. There may be like some psychological reasons why I'm still attached to this piece of paper because I just received it yesterday or last week or, you know, in the not very distant future in the past. So I'm still attached to this piece of paper. I can't just let it go. So what am I going to do with it? I'm going to put it in my filing system. And this filing system is basically, so the most important part is that it's a temporary filing system. So you have to think of it, whatever is going to go in there is not going to be permanent to you. It's just going to be there for a certain amount of time. And in this situation, it's going to be 12 months. And we're going to, at a certain point, in another 12 months, we're going to get rid of that piece of paper. So the system is very much meant to be like alive, rotating, moving things in and out of your life. So it goes from January through December. Anything and everything that has no long-term value to you is going to go in there. These pieces of paper are going to be things like, you know, statements and utilities and FYI letters. I'm going to go extensively into what goes in there in our next class, because this is basically 80% of the paperwork we receive on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Those are all of the papers that I see cluttering everybody's desks and offices and, you know, cubbies and kitchens and drawers. Those are all of the things that we don't need to have long term, but we don't know what to do with them in the short term. So then we just stash them in these little crevices, hoping that at some point they will disappear, but they don't because we didn't deal with them. So this monthly filing system is going to hopefully change your life. I mean, it has changed a lot of my clients' lives, and it makes life so much easier when you have an easy place to put all of that stuff. Now, this is the filing system that I would put it somewhere that is super easily accessible. I have mine in the kitchen because that's where I read my mail. The kitchen is on the first floor. I have sacrificed some cabinet space for it. So I put the filing system down there. It's a 12, you know, it's a 12 tab system. So it takes a file bin. Next time I'm going to show you what that looks like. And whenever I'm done reading my mail, most of the stuff is like on auto pay for me because I forget to pay my bills like everybody else. So I set them on revolving auto pay. And then I look at the bill and I say, yes, in fact, I have set up this payment to go automatically every month. Nothing crazy has happened in the bill. Just recently my mortgage payment got lost. So as I was reading the thing, it said, you know, payment not received. And I'm like, oh, what's up with that? So then I had to do some investigative work to figure out what happened. But, you know, all is good in the world of online baking, and they found it. But I was like, you know, nothing, if nothing had happened, then I would have said, great, they got my last payment. Everything looks good. Nothing is crazy about it. And then, you know, I went through 4 or 5 different bills. It's like my cable bill, it's my electric bill, it's my gas bill, and it's my mortgage payment that day. And I'm like, awesome. I don't have to take any actions with those pieces of papers. So guess what? They were all FYI pieces of paper, right? They told me I owe some money to these people. I send them money, and then that piece of paper is completely useless to me. So I stuck them in my filing system. So let's assume that, you know, this is April. I just read all of these. I got my mail. I read all of these bills. It is April. What I would do, I would just stick them into the month of April. So every month, as I am receiving these FYI pieces of paper from the world around me, I'm sticking them into the current month that I'm in, right? And so since this is our first year doing this filing system, you can go back a year and keep paperwork back into next year, or you can just start fresh and just go from now, depending on how you're going to go back and deal with the past paperwork. So all of those FYI letters are going to be kept for 1 year. So next year, when April comes around, I go into my April file. The first time that I receive some mail, so it's whenever you are filing things away, I would pull out all of the paperwork that was in the April file. I would look through it and make sure that nothing important got stuck in there or in there by accident. I'm always a fan of double checking because you never know, people stick things in places randomly. And then I would say, no, in fact, I do not need my mortgage payment from last year on April, or my cable bill, or my electric bill, or my gas bill, or any of those things that I have. I can, in fact, shred all of this stuff, and then I can start filing something new. So every month, I'm kind of revolving my filing system into like a file, and I get rid of stuff. I file, and I get rid of stuff, right? So you're never going to end up with an entire basement of utility bills from the 1960s because there wasn't a trigger that forced you to get rid of stuff within a year, right? This is like the part of the filing system that totally makes everybody so happy because it helps you put it away, and then it easily helps you get rid of it. The second part of the filing system is for the IRS, and they're basically all of your taxes. There are certain things that I'm going to suggest that we add to that. We're also going to talk about this one in depth. So if you decide to start sorting between this week and next week, anything that is related to your taxes, I would write, taxes. I would write the year on it on your sticky note, and just start keeping those things kind of grouped together. And as we get to the next part of it, then we'll talk a little bit more about what to do with that stuff. And then the third part of the filing system is your personal permanent files. And these are, this is actually a filing system for one of my clients. She has a couple of cars. She has her financial paperwork. She has a section that goes with her. Her first name is Kathy. This is in the first part of it. This is what her monthly filing system looks like. She doesn't have the need to keep a lot of paperwork, so she can pretty much save that space in the very front to keep her FYI letters. However, I have clients that need an entire drawer just for that. I personally have an entire drawer because I keep a lot of paperwork. I keep all of the receipts people send me. I keep all of my grocery receipts, my consumable receipts. So once again, I'm going to show you the entire list of things that I keep in my monthly filing system in the next class. But it just gives you a basic idea for what the setup is going to look like. And sometimes I work with people and they have businesses. So if you have a business, that should have its own filing system. And we're not going to extensively talk about businesses in this class. However, all of the things that I'm going to teach you there are basically related to your personal. You can probably easily duplicate that for your business depending on what kind of business you have. So in review, we're going to create goals that are SMART. So we're going to create goals that are specific and measurable, attainable, realistic, and within time frame. So we're not going to say things like, I'm going to organize my entire office in one day, because that's not realistic, right? We're going to say things like, I'm going to organize my desk today, or I'm going to sort through this one pile of paper on the right-hand side by 5 p.m. today. So whenever I finish, I can say, yay, I sorted that one pile. I have accomplished something that I committed myself. We're going to visualize our ideal space so we can feel like whenever we get bogged down, we're like, okay, I want my office to look white and clean like the Pottery Barn. We're going to not talk poorly to ourselves about our mindset, right? We're not disorganized anymore. We are, organized people in progress. We're going to be ruthless, but not reckless. So really be diligent about what we're throwing away, what we're keeping, and why. We're going to really think about naming convention and how are we naming these files. So into the future, we can find that stuff. And most importantly, we're going to ask ourselves, how are we going to use this piece of paper, right? And for the very first part of it, we're just, if you're like doing a pre-sort and you're not creating a filing system, just kind of think of the 3 buckets, right? Is this personal? Is this taxes? Or is this an FYI that I only need for the short term that could go into my monthly? So let's see, are there any questions over here? Talked a lot and fast. I don't see any questions. So I'm going to give it 1 second. Take a drink. All right, so there are no questions. I'm going to close the call then today, and we'll meet next week where we're going to start talking about, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about our monthly filing system, and we're going to dive deep into the record retention guidelines to help you really truly understand why are we keeping the stuff and how we're keeping it, and hopefully start developing those systems. So I hope you have an awesome week. I can't wait to see you next week and pick up week 2 and see where we go from there. Anyway, have an awesome day. Bye.